Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is David. This is episode 864B, and today's date is January 11th, 2016, and the title of the episode is U.S. Sending More Troops into the Middle East. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, DHS seems to be having a problem because all the states are not cooperating with DHS because they want to implement the Real ID, and according to their documentation, they were going to have all U.S. citizens get a Real ID by 2016, and they wanted everyone to use this Real ID for air travels within the United States. But a lot of the states are fighting back. They don't want the Real ID, and we have to remember what the Real ID is. This is a centralized database system where all your information is going to be fed into one database. Now, I know DHS is saying, no, we're not doing that, and the Real ID is going to include all your information, eventually a fingerprint, a barcode on the back, a RFID chip. And now they're saying, well, we're going to have to extend the deadline, and DHS Secretary Jay Johnson came out and said, okay, we will give the states up to January 22nd, 2018. And by that point in time, everyone needs to have the Real ID. Now, as we know, there's going to be a new president by then. As we know, there's going to be a new secretary of the DHS by then. And it seems at this point is they can't get the states on the same page. They don't want to cooperate with DHS, and we see that there are some state leaders like Neil Kirk and Warren Limmer saying that they'll never let this happen, and this is gaining traction, and they're saying there's no reason to track every single citizen using this ID, and you have to remember this information would have been given over to Canada, it would have been given over to Mexico, and most likely throughout Europe, all your information would be spread all over the place so they can track you wherever you go. And we can see right now they're having a little bit of a trouble getting this done. And we see that the agencies of the United States government are continually spying on everyone. They haven't stopped doing that whatsoever, even though the president told us that, he was going to look into this and he was going to stop this. And we have the USA Freedom Act, which really took all the spying from the NSA and moved it over to the corporations. And the corporations, because CISA was signed by the president, which he said he was going to veto, now they can take that information, which is private to you, send it over to the government, and if something happens, the corporations aren't liable. And you have to remember, this is all they were worried about, being liable by handing over your personal private information. And the government says, well, we're not going to hold you liable. Don't worry about it. Just give us the information. You have everything in place to spy on the people. You know their purchases. You know the bank account. You know exactly where they are. You know where they're going every day, so you can track them very easily. But the police and other agencies are taking this another step forward, and they're going to assign everyone a threat score, because they want to know when they're surveilling people who is a threat, who is not a threat, and they're going to have this different type of chart of a scale of who's a threat and how great of a threat you are. And they're going to do this by collecting your email, collecting your phone calls, where have you been, who have you spoken to. And a lot of advocacy groups are complaining that this is a complete violation of your rights, and there's no reason to give everyone a threat score. And this gives these agencies unprecedented power to look into everyone's lives. So we can see this is going to the next level. And like I said, we all need to protect ourselves. Just like we lock up our house, we lock up our safe, we lock up our valuables, we lock up our cars, we need to lock up our data, our email, our browsing habits, our purchases. We all need to do this. I mean, there's many different ways of doing this. I mean, there's something called startpage.com. It hooks into Google, but what it does It hides your searches. You can also use the proxies on start page, which will also hide your location. Sometimes the websites don't come up that great, but you have the option to use it. You can use encrypted email. You can use Pi encryption, which is an open source encryption method, which is on my site. You can scroll down a little bit. Someone created this. It's an open source code. So you can see the code to see what is in there if you understand coding. But you can use it to encrypt messages that you send through email. You can use a product called blockitpocket.com. This is a sleeve where you can slide in your credit card, if you have a real ID right now, you can slide in your real ID. You can slide in your phone, your iPad, and it will block the signal from the RFID chip. It will also block the signal from your iPhone or any other device that you have, so you cannot be tracked. So there are certain ways to protect yourself. And while the U.S. government, the federal government, is violating all our rights, we see a Texas governor, Governor Greg Abbott. He wants to basically amend the Constitution with 9 amendments. And he's saying that he wants to restore the rule of law in America. And these are the couple of things that he wants to do. He wants to prohibit Congress from regulating activity that occurs wholly within one state. He wants to require Congress to balance its budget, which should be a given. I don't know if we really need that in there. I mean, they should always, that should be number one. Prohibit administrative agencies from creating federal law. Prohibit administrative agencies from preempting state law. Allow a 2/3 majority of the states to override a U.S. Supreme Court decision. Require 7-justice supermajority vote for U.S. Supreme Court decisions that invalidate a democratically enacted law. Restore the balance of power between the federal and state governments by limiting the former to the powers expressly delegated to it in the Constitution. Give state officials the power to sue in federal court when federal officials overstep their bounds. Allow a 2/3 majority of the states to override a federal law or regulation. And the way the Founding Fathers actually created the system is that the states actually have the power, the people have the power, and the federal government does not have the power. But we are not seeing that today. We're seeing the opposite happen. And this is why we all need to start standing up and saying, you know what? Enough is enough. And we need to take back this power. Now, out in North Korea, they are really pushing this. Right now, the U.S. is planning on sanctions on North Korea after the alleged nuclear test. And if you notice, they dropped the proving of that there was a nuclear test, and they're just going on with the threats and preparing for some type of war. We also know that the United States flew the B-52 bomber over South Korea. North Korea came back and said, if this continues, we're going to threaten you with a nuclear response. So then the U.S. military was put on the highest alert ever after the threat from North Korea. Japan and the UK are speaking to each other, saying, you know something? We should swiftly sign a deal on cross deliveries of military equipment and services. And Japan and the United Kingdom should hold joint seminar to boost their military power on January 19th in the Philippines. And we can see that they're using this to push agreements, to push drills, and to prepare for this major war. This is what it's all about. Provoking, getting things passed, getting bills passed, getting more funds for this upcoming war. Because everything that we've been seeing is in preparation for this. Now, out in Ukraine, Kiev came out and they are making it very clear they do not want to implement the Minsk peace agreement. And what they're suggesting right now is scrapping the Minsk 2 and replacing it with the Minsk 3. And they're saying they're already preparing the Minsk 3. Now, Russia, Germany, France, they're not involved in this. This is Kiev doing this right now. And they're saying that the Minsk 2, we looked at it once again, and it's 50% out of line with a range of problems that, have to do with Ukraine and Donbass today. And this is why we need the new Minsk 3. And this will be a lot better than what the Minsk 2 wants us to do. And you have to remember, the United States, France, Germany, United Kingdom, they continually say that, Russia better enforce the Minsk 2 ceasefire agreement. Russia better enforce it. Well, the Minsk 2 ceasefire agreement puts all the pressure on Kiev. And Putin actually came out and did a Minsk 101 for everyone that continually says this. And he said the main thing that should be done on the execution of the Minsk agreement is on the side of Kiev, adding that it is impossible to demand from Moscow that what Kiev should do. Remember, Kiev signed this. Poroshenko was there. He went on to explain to journalists in what sequence the points of the agreement should be completed. And here it is, clearly written that the constitutional reform should be carried out, and it's not Moscow that must make these decisions. He says it's Kiev. They're the ones who must do the constitutional reforms. Then the political process, and on the basis of these processes is the creation of an atmosphere of trust, and then the completion of all processes, including closing the border. But guess what? Kiev doesn't want to do this. Kiev has been stalling. And they're going to try to push this Minsk 3, which, of course, the Donbass region and Russia are not going to agree with. And we're going to see an offensive. We can see it's already leading up to that. We see already that a hospital in Yemen was hit by a Saudi-led airstrike. And there are people that are killed, civilians that are killed in the hospital. And remember, we know that the UK has forces on the ground directing these strikes. We know the United States is orchestrating these sites. We're also getting word that the British government has been accused of violating international law by enabling the export of British-made arms to Saudi Arabia, which may have been used to kill civilians. I'm going to say not maybe. They have. Law firm Layday has challenged the government's export of missiles and other arms to the Gulf state, and they are looking into what is going on here. And they're saying it's completely illegal. Of course it is. Why is Saudi Arabia in Yemen in the first place? Yemen never attacked Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia invaded Yemen. Just like the United States, England, the coalition forces invaded Syria, invaded Libya, invaded Lebanon, invaded Iraq. Now we see things are going down in Libya. A major power plant in the eastern Libyan city of Benghazi has been attacked. And of course, they're all out there. It's the Islamic State. But this fits into what the United States does when they're getting ready to move into an area. They bring down the power. And this is what we're seeing right now. We're seeing the power being brought down in Libya. They're getting ready for a major offensive in Libya. We see that the U.S. is getting ready to deploy 1,800 more troops to Iraq and Afghanistan. And the 101st Airborne Division, based out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky, is sending out 1,300 soldiers from its 2nd Brigade Combat Team to Iraq as part of Operation Inherent Resolve. Of course, it's for training, and they're only going there for training, of course. The 10th Mountain Division is deploying 500 troops from its 2nd Battalion, 87th Infantry Regiment, to Afghanistan. Of course, for another type of drill in Afghanistan. And we know that these troops are going to stay there. They're not going to be brought back. And more troops are going to be added. So what they're doing is they're slowly adding more and more troops into these areas. It is called mission creep, because they don't have an authorization for war to bring in a massive amount of troops. This is why they're trying to use other forces at this point. And if you look, the entire offensive, which is being organized by Egypt, by Italy, by France, by Saudi Arabia, into Libya, is all being done, and most of the forces are not U.S. soldiers. There are some U.S. soldiers, yes, which they're getting ready to bring in, but we can see at this point they're using many other foreign nations to bring in the soldiers and to beef it up, just like they're doing with Syria. Out in Turkey, we see that Turkey has fired about 800 journalists, 156 detained, and right now Turkey is ranked 149th out of 180 countries in the Press Freedom Index. But wasn't Erdogan on the front lines of freedom of speech after the Charlie Hebdo? So you can tell that was all fake, phony, and false also, because they contradict everything that they do. We see that Assad and the Russian forces for 40 days have freed 150 cities and towns. This is the greatest success which was achieved in Aleppo, Latakia, Hama, and Homs. And they're saying they're freeing more and more, and liberating more and more towns and cities, pushing the Islamic State back. And we know that the peace talks, the ceasefire talks in Syria are coming up the end of January. And we know that part of the requirements is the United States and the coalition forces handing over who the opposition groups are and who are the terrorists. Well, Jordan already says they're not giving a list of anything. We're not giving you a list of the terrorists, and we're not going to disclose anything about this. The Syrian government says, well, we need the list because we're not going to talk to terrorists. We want to know who the real opposition group is. But the thing is, they're all terrorists. There is no opposition group. It was created out of thin air. These are all paid mercenaries. The Free Syrian Army was made up of paid mercenaries, not Syrians. The Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, you name it. They are all terrorists. This is why they're having a problem coming up with the list. Eventually they might come up with something, but right now they can't come up with anything. And the Syrian government is saying, well, this is part of our requirement. And we're going to have to watch this very closely, because there's no way that there's going to be peace and they're just going to let Assad stay and let the people decide in a fair election who is going to be their leader. They're not going to let this happen. Their goal is always the same. They're changing tactics. They're making something new right now, and we're going to see something big coming up very soon. We see the Islamic State right now has issued a chilling update to the Al-Qaeda terror manual, explaining how to carry out lone wolves. Now, this is all scare tactics by the governments, the agencies that are putting this together, because we know the Islamic State is the proxy army of all of these countries to get Assad out of power. And it's also being used to scare the people of their countries into doing things they normally wouldn't do, like give up their rights, allowed to be spied on, pushed into war. So all of this is being done from the inside to scare people. And on this 64-page guide, they tell you, it tells their followers on how to do this. And there's also a mocked-up image of New York buildings on fire. Now, eventually, we know they're going to be creating this false flag event, because they need this event to cover up this entire system that's collapsing right now. They need it to bring us to war. And they're continually giving us bits and feeding us a little bit of information each time to let us know that something is coming. But the thing we have to understand is that this is not from a terror group. This is from our internal government the agencies, and this is same thing in Europe, same thing in UK, because they're trying to push their agenda forward. This whole entire scare tactic is to make us do things we normally wouldn't do, and that is go to war. And this is what they're continually pushing. And we can see already that they're working on a new plan. It's in the works right now. We're just waiting for the next big boom to hit. And that can't be too far off. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.